Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias.
Hi, and welcome to part one of, how should I describe this? Collecting case pocket knives, why you should collect case pocket knives. I really don't know. It just is a marathon that began as what was supposed to be a simple answer to a viewer's question of why should I buy case knives versus Rough Ryder knives. Rough Ryder knives are just as good. And so in this first episode, we really look into what is a collector's item versus what is a collectible. And that will lead us a little bit more into why you should buy a case knife versus why you should buy a Rough Ryder knife. In any case, let's get started.
Well, if you read the title to this video, you know it's about why should somebody collect case knives when Rough Ryder knives are just as good. And I'm going to try and answer that question, and also tackle that that notion that people have that Rough Ryder knives are just as good as case knives. And before I go into that, I'm not bashing Rough Ryder knives at all. I own about 270 Rough Ryder knives and about 50 case knives. So I obviously collect both of them, and I must find value in both brands. Otherwise, I wouldn't have so many of them. But before I go into the meat of this episode, which is on why collect case knives when Rough Ryders are just as good, let me talk to you about two recent case knives that I managed to purchase, because that's going to be something else I'll be talking about in this video. And that second part would be, if you're going to collect case knives, which case knives would you recommend collecting? And if you think case versus Rough Ryder is subjective, that second part is even going to be more subjective. But before I get into that, let me show you my two most recent case purchases. And the first one is down here. I think I have shown this already once before. And this is the case barn door jig bone Junior Scout. And this is, let's see, model number 2629, and it came out in 2008, hence the two X's on there with the case double X. And I wish I knew what kind of shield that was. It's kind of an interesting shield going on, and really just some pretty bone going on. Otherwise, it is a Junior Scout knife. This makes the fourth of the Junior Scout knives that I have managed to pick up. This one is not in pristine condition. It definitely appeared when I first got it that whoever owned it before me took off the bail and reattached it when they were going to sell it. It was actually a little loose when it arrived. I have since made it a little bit tighter so it won't just fall off. But they're a little hard to find. I didn't have one, and I wanted one, so I went ahead and grabbed it because I got it at a decent price. And that's one of the things that is with case knives as far as I'm concerned. If you're going to collect them, make sure you get them at a decent price, because if you're paying top retail value on it, your return on investment is probably going to still be nil. Let me move on to the other case knife I recently found. And as many people know, the case Copperhead came out of the vault this year. That was something that Case does. They put knives away for a while to increase interest in the pattern. Well, I did not pick up a new case Copperhead yet. I'm not even sure if I'm going to, but I did get a baby Copperhead, and this is one that came out in 2008, and I got this one for a screaming good deal. I don't think the person realized just what they had. But as you see, genuine India sandbar stag. And this is my second baby copperhead by a case. Now the baby copperhead is not your typical copperhead in that this is actually a penknife. The blades are on opposite ends. So this one has the clip blade. As I mentioned, it is a 10 dot, so it came out in 2000. And the secondary blade on it from the opposite end is the little pen blade. And this is in stainless steel, so case is true sharp surgical steel, which is basically a 420 high carbon steel. This is the second of the baby copperheads that I have managed to get from WR Case & Son. The first one I got is right over here. This is the root beer jig bone case with the Case XX USA shield, which is a pretty cool shield. This one I believe came out in what was it, 2008 or something? No, 2014 I believe. Let me see here. Yeah, this is a 2014 version, but notice instead of your typical clip blade, this one had the worn clip blade, and it has the little swedge going on with the worn clip blade. So definitely a step up from the earlier one in stag. But believe it or not, I think over time, even though this one has the basic blade, because it is a stag handled one, it may end up increasing in value more than the worn clip blade. It really just depends on the collectors of the future, how much they value a worn clip blade over a genuine stag. Any case, I wanted to show those real quick because those are my two latest case knives that I have. And now that brings us to the next part of this, which is why bother collecting case knives when Rough Ryder knives are just as good, and there's actually more variety in Rough Ryder knives than there are in case knives. And there are a lot of reasons, I would say, to collect case knives over Rough Ryder knives. One of the reasons is not the price of the case knives, though. And I think that's where Rough Ryder definitely has case beaten, in that they are a lower priced product. And they are a good quality product for the price that you're paying. When you're paying $15 for a pocket knife and you're going to get a good 4 or 5 years worth of use out of it, what's there to complain about? I mean, seriously, is that not a bargain to pay $15 and use something for 5 years that is basically thought of as a disposable item? Could a Rough Ryder become a family heirloom? Any knife can become a family heirloom. So case doesn't have them beat simply because it's a case knife, and that will be something cherished and passed on. If my father had been a person who had been carrying a particular knife, I don't care what the knife was, and it ended up in my hands, I would want that knife, and it would be a family heirloom. So that's not a reason to say, oh, that's case knives, you can pass that down to your kids. You can pass anything down to your kids. If your kids like you, they're going to like whatever you gave them. Or they may end up selling it on eBay anyway, because it just doesn't mean anything to them. And that's just the fact of life. So if you're looking at it for sentimental values, then neither knife is really going to be good, bad, or indifferent. Any knife can have great sentimental value, and any knife could have absolutely no sentimental value. So that kills it as far as collector's item. We have to think of actually what a collector's item is versus what a collectible is. So let's get that out of the way first, and then we'll go into a little bit more about why I believe case knives make a better collectible as well as a better collector's item. Now let's first get the collectible part out of the way. What I believe a collectible is something that is made to be collected. That could be almost anything. Beanie Babies were made to be collected. Hummels are made to be collected. Case knives, unfortunately these days, are made to be collected. Rough Ryder knives are definitely made to be collected. That doesn't mean you can't use them, but so many of them are made specifically for the purpose of collecting. Any kind of commemorative knife with a blade etch on it or something like that is designed to be collected, not necessarily used, even though you can use it. So anytime something becomes something that is designed to be collected, the value of it over time becomes suspect. So, for instance, this Black Widow Rough Ryder, this knife was definitely designed to be collected. It's got a really nice handle there. You've got this terrific blade edge of the spider on there and everything. Once you start using it, you're going to mess up the blade edge. Came with a beautiful Black Widow box for it and everything else. It was a collectible item. That doesn't mean you can't use it. It doesn't mean that the blade steel is not a decent steel for an everyday carry knife. It's 440A. It's what you expect. It's 440A. A good all-around steel that'll cut lots of things that people need every day to have cut. Paper, cutting open a box, cutting tape. You could cut a steak with it. Whatever you want to do with it, you can do that with 440A. Same with the Case True Sharp surgical steel, which today is most likely a 420 high carbon steel. You also got the pinch bolster up here, and it looks nice. It's a really nice looking knife, and it is designed to be collected. That's different than a collector's item. In my eyes, none of the knives out here are collector's items. So what is a collector's item? Well, first of all, a collector's item is something that was made that has some kind of intrinsic value that a collector is interested in. Now, collectibles do have that going for them, but a collector's item goes beyond that, because most of the time, the collector's item, the maker of it, especially when it comes to a manufactured knife, the maker of it did not intend for the item to be collected. They intended it to be used, which means to find one in pristine condition makes it very scarce and something that is sought after by collectors. So if the knife was made to be collected, then plenty of other people are out there holding on to it. So, for instance, this Case large toothpick I have here, I don't know how many of these were made. Say Case made 5,000 of them for the market. Well, what they did was they made 5,000 of these knives for the sole purpose of selling 5,000 of these knives. If they thought they could have sold 10,000 of them, they would have made 10,000 of them. But what they really expected to do was be able to sell about 5,000 of them. So they sold 5,000 of them, and people bought them. And if most of those knives never get used, well, later on down the road, the value of this knife is not going to increase dramatically unless suddenly there's this surge of people who want to collect extra large toothpicks by case. If that doesn't happen, then the value of this knife is going to remain about the same. So why did I buy it? I bought it because I liked it. It's something I wanted. Do I expect to be able to make a large return on the investment of this knife? No, I do not. And I never buy a knife expecting a large return on investment, simply because I just don't think it's going to happen. Now, it does happen. I saw this. This was definitely a collectible knife. They were selling for around $110 when they first came out. Hobie on YouTube sold one of these for $500. That's a good return on investment. Will this knife hold on to that high return on investment, say 8, 9, 10 years down the road? Maybe yes, maybe no. You really don't know. It was the right time to sell it. He sold it at the right time. The Boy Scouts are in disarray. A lot of people who are collecting Boy Scout stuff are just buying it up like crazy right now. So this is the time for that market. Now let's turn our attention to collector's items, and we'll look at another Boy Scout knife. And this one is from the 1920s, and this has the Be Prepared shield. This is an old Hammer brand by New York Knife Company. Boy Scout knife, Boy Scouts of America. And is it in great shape? No, not at all. And these knives, they went for about $1.50 when they were first coming out. Yeah, around $1.50. Nothing fancy about the knife. It's just your 4-blade camp utility knife that the Boy Scouts used. And they used a lot, and they wore them out. And so not a lot of them survived over the last 100 years. And because of that, these knives that once went for $1.50 now go for easily $100, even in this shape. If I were to get one of these knives in pristine condition, like it just left the factory, you could easily sell them for $1,000. But the thing is that's not something you're going to find every day. These knives, as scarce as they are, their scarcity is based on the number that were produced. These were produced in the probably 10 to 50,000. These probably under 10,000, probably closer to like 5,000 or less. And they were produced specifically for the collector's market. These knives, they were heavily used. These knives don't get used. So these are going to survive better than these knives will. And so when you run across one of these knives, if you can get it at a low price, it's because the person who has it doesn't know what they have. So like if you find it at an estate sale or something and it's in really good shape, you're lucky, and you basically scored gold. You know, these are the ones that a person will buy at an estate sale for $15 and then go and throw and sell it on eBay for $500 to $1,000. The person who sold this knife most likely paid about $100 for it and got $500 for it. Still a good return on investment, but not the same kind of return on investment that you get with this. And these knives, the market for them will continue to grow. The market for this is suspect. You don't know how long it's going to be around. Sometimes you're better off selling collectibles on a short turn. That's what you see with a lot of the Great Eastern knives. A person will buy one and flip it immediately. They'll buy one from one of the dealers for $110, and then the next day they're going to be selling it on eBay for $230 because somebody else just couldn't get it. I look at that as the Beanie Baby syndrome, where people were just crazy to get that Beanie Baby, you know, that Princess Diana Beanie Baby that was so hard to get. So they were willing to pay 25, 30, 50 bucks for a $5 Beanie Baby, thinking that it's going to be worth something great in the future, only to find out 15, 20 years later that they can't even get the $5 that it was originally worth. So that might be what happens with some of these Great Easterns that are going for high value now, but down the road, will they retain that high value? The world of collecting really can't answer that question. So when it comes to collector's items, I would bet my money more on knives like this, the old Boy Scout knife, or this is a U.S. Army knife, utility knife that was made around the beginning of World War II by Camillus. This one's in pretty good shape, so I have a feeling this knife will retain its value and go up better than this knife will. And same with this knife, which is a United States Marine Corps milk knife or military knife that was made in 1944. Carbon steel blades, carbon steel back springs, stainless steel handles, and brass liners going on in there. So this knife and this knife and this knife, these knives were not made to be collected. They were made to be used, and somehow they have survived being used. The better shape a knife that was made to be used is, you know, how can I phrase that better? The better shape a knife is that was made to be used and somehow has survived not being used. Those are the knives that are going to be of more value than a knife that was made to be collected, even though it could be used, because these knives don't get used as often as something like this knife. So the knives that were made to be used tend to go up in value more in the collector's market if there is a desire for them. And that is really what drives the collector's market. The desire to collect that particular brand has to be there. And if that desire is not there, then the value of the knife is not going to increase.
Okay, this is as bad as reality TV on the History Channel. I rambled on for 29 minutes and have yet to get to the answer to the question, why buy a case knife when a Rough Ryder knife is just as good? I don't know, for some reason I just felt I needed to get a little bit of background information out there and let you know where I'm coming from. But I do promise in part 2 I will actually answer that question. Yes, I know there's a part 3 and a part 4, but just consider that as additional fluff. Part 2 will answer the question of why buy a case knife when a Rough Ryder knife is just as good. Stick around for part 2, which will be in just a few days.
Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with Tobias. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.